Hi everyone. Today we are going to be putting together some of our conditional statements into a logical order using something called law of detachment and law of syllogism. So using these two laws we can form logical arguments by being able to put our if-then statements together. So the first example is this one here. It says, put the following statements into a logical order. If you go to a movie, then you will spend all of your money. If you clean your room, then you will go to a movie. If you cannot buy gas for the car, then you will be stranded. And if you spend all of your money, then you cannot buy gas for the car. So what I'm going to have you do is I'm going to have you take a moment, pause the video, see if you can come up with a logical order for these four statements. They should all fit together in a very specific way. So you should be able to read it, and one sentence is going to lead right into the next. Go ahead and do that real quickly, pause the video, and see if you can figure out the logical order for those statements. Okay, so this is the logical order that I was looking for you to figure out. The first statement is, if you clean your room, then you will go to a movie. Now the next statement that I find has to start with, then I will go to a movie. So going to the movie is next. So if I go to a movie, then you will spend all of your money. So you can see how these two sentences are connected here, that if I go to a movie, then I will go to a movie, right? They're connected. And that's really what we are doing here. We're kind of making a chain out of the information. So if I clean my room, then I will go to a movie. If I go to a movie, then I will spend all my money. The next statement needs to start with if I spend all my money, right? So if I spend all of my money, then I cannot buy gas for the car. And then the very last statement, if I cannot buy gas for the car, then you will be stranded. So the moral of this story, or if we were to actually use the law of syllogism, that is actually the law we are using right now. This is like the chain. If you can make a chain out of your statements, the very first thing that happens is us cleaning our room. So the final conclusion that we could make from this is, if I clean my room, so the very first if I clean my room. The final conclusion is, if I clean my room, then the very last thing that happens in all of this is that we get stranded, right? Then I will be stranded. Okay, so the final conclusion from putting all of those statements together. The final conclusion is we start with the very first if, and we end with the very last then, and we skip all the stuff in between. Okay, so that is us creating a logical order of statements and coming up with a final conclusion using the law of syllogism. So we're going to see this again later on in the lesson. Deductive reasoning. Deductive reasoning, if you see that phrase, that just means you're using logic, you're using logical reasoning, you're putting statements together, you are you're figuring out what these statements mean, putting them together, using definitions in order to come up with a logical conclusion. The law of detachment. So what I would like you to think about is that example that I gave last week with your parents telling you, if you clean your room, then you can go to the party. Suppose the statement, if you clean your room, then you can go to the party. Suppose that that's a true statement. Your mom is telling the truth, okay? If you clean your room, then you really can go to the party. Now suppose you did clean your room. Your room has been cleaned. What can you conclude from that? You can conclude then that you can go to the party, right? The last part is also true. The then part is also true. So then I can go to the party. Okay? So here's an example. So I'm going to tell you this first original statement, that this is a true sentence. If I go to the mall, then I will be spending $50. That is a true statement. I'm not lying when I tell you this. Now, the next part is, suppose I tell you I went to the mall. I'm giving you the if part. I'm telling you that this if part has been done. The logical conclusion is the then part. I spent $50, right? If the whole sentence is true, and I give you the if part has been done, then the then part must happen. Okay, so then I have to have spent $50. The Q part is also true. So I spent my $50. Okay? Okay, so now in these questions here, they're asking us, what can we conclude? So what I want you to remember is the conclusion of an if-then statement, that's the then part. Okay? We are looking for the then part. So as long as we satisfy the if, okay, your if part must be satisfied. Then the then part can happen, must happen. Okay? If the if part is not satisfied, then the then part cannot happen. So that's what we're looking for in here. So if it is raining outside, then there are clouds in the sky. We are going to assume this sentence is a true sentence. This is a true conditional. Now, if the if part is satisfied, we can conclude the then part. So if it's raining outside, must be satisfied. Now they tell us, hey, it's raining today. So that's the if part. The if part's good. It's been satisfied. So then the final conclusion is that there are clouds in the sky. Okay? So the key to this is the if part satisfied? Yes, it was. If it is raining outside? Yes, it is raining outside today. Okay. So if the if part is satisfied, then the then part, you can assume the then part is also true. So the conclusion we could make is, yes, there are clouds in the sky. The next one, if Malcolm scores at least an 85% on his final exam, so we're looking for this part to be satisfied. We want to know, did Malcolm score at least 85% on his final? If he does, then he'll get an A for the term. So we're assuming that first sentence is true. We also assume the second part is also true. Malcolm scored a 90% on his final. Well, does this satisfy the if part? Malcolm scored a 90%. He only needed at least 85. So he satisfied the if part. The if part's done. He got that. He scored a 90. He only needed an 85%. So that means the final conclusion we can make is that he is going to get an A for the term. Okay, more specifically, I should have said Malcolm here. Malcolm. Malcolm will get an A for the term. Okay, when they use specifics in the sentence, you want to stay consistent. So if they said that Molly scored a 92% on her final exam, you would want to say something about Molly. Okay, now of course, it could be, suppose Malcolm didn't score 90. Suppose he scored 70% on his final. Then we would not be able to make this final conclusion because then we didn't satisfy the if. Okay? So if the if part is not satisfied, then you cannot make any conclusion. And we will get to that in a second. If two angles are vertical, then they are congruent. So this is the part we have to know. Are we satisfying the if or not? If two angles are vertical. Angle 3 and angle 4, those are vertical angles. 3 and 4 are vertical angles. So that is satisfying the if part. We got the if part down. That's good. So then what conclusion can I make specifically about angles 3 and angle 4? I have to use 3 and 4 in this, angle 3 and 4. Well, 3 and 4, they must be congruent then. Then we can make the conclusion about the then part. So I'm going to write this out as angle 3 is congruent to angle 4. And yes, I am using my notation there for congruent. That symbol is going to come up quite a bit. You need to know that symbol is for congruent. Okay, and that was talked about earlier in the trimester. Okay, law of syllogism. This is the part that we talked about at the very first part of the lesson. So being able to piece together sentences. So if P then Q, notice the Q part or the then part is the very first part of the next sentence. So we are kind of making like a chain out of this. And you don't always have to have 2 sentences. You could have 3 or 4 sentences like we had in the beginning of the lesson here today. But moral of the story is you just follow the chain. If you know the very first if is true, and the whole sentence here is true, then that means that the Q part is true, right? And if the Q part is true, then the then part, or then the R part is also true. So if you can follow, if the very first if is true and all of your sentences are true, then you can follow it to the very end, and then you know that R is also true. Okay? So that's the logic chain. That's the law of syllogism. And we're going to be using the law of syllogism a lot. Okay, this is basically how we structure our proofs. We start with a statement, we look for something else that relates to that then part, and then we can make another conclusion. Okay, so this is basically, we're starting to get into proofs and logic chains here. Okay, so here's an example. If it's Wednesday, then I have a geometry test. If I have a geometry test, then I will bring my note card. We're assuming both of those sentences are true. Okay, if it's Wednesday, then I have a geometry test. If I have a geometry test, then I have to bring my note card. Now we are told it's Wednesday today. So we satisfied this very first if. We satisfied the very first if. The final conclusion. What can I conclude? This is the final conclusion. So the very last then. Okay, that's what this is. This is the last then. The final conclusion I can make is that I will need to bring my note card. Okay, so this next example says, what can we conclude from the given information? Now you're going to notice with these statements, we're not given a third statement. Like we know for sure your number is 18 or your number is 24 or whatever. We're just given the original 2 sentences. So if a number is divisible by 12, then it is divisible by 6. If a number is divisible by 6, then it is divisible by 3. So the question here is first of all, can you make the chain? Right? Can you make the chain out of this? This one, yes, we can, because the then part here, it is divisible by 6. If a number is divisible by 6, so those 2 match up, we can make a chain out of it, so that's good. Okay, so we can use the law of syllogism with this. Now it's asking us what the conclusion is. 2, what's the conclusion? The conclusion is the first if and the very last then put together in a sentence. Okay, so we take our very first if a number is divisible by 12, and we're going to write that down here. If a number is divisible by 12, then. Now, we skip all the stuff in between, okay? So this, then it is divisible by 6 if a number is divisible by 6. Basically, we're cutting out the middleman here. Okay, now that we know we can make the chain out of it, let's get rid of all the middle links. And so we're just going to skip to the very last then part. Then it is divisible by 3. Okay, so that's the very last then.